Hi again then guys, and welcome to episode 5 of Forget Your Warranty, the review series for Gran Turismo's selection of aftermarket tuner cars, some competition spec, some drift spec, some street spec. And in this particular pick we're featuring a vehicle which we've already featured before on the channel in a different series, the Dark series. And this is a car which, obviously, because it was in the Dark series, is a car that I believe is underappreciated. It's a car which does certainly have fans, and the fans of the car tend to really love it. But there aren't a huge amount of those fans. And the car in question is a Honda S2000, of course. There are actually quite a few variations of the Honda S2000 on Gran Turismo. I believe it's actually the most popular choice of aftermarket tuner car in the game, even more so than the Skylines. And one of the great things about the S2000 is that it's a good base model to work from. You can build the car into a variety of different purposes. Just take, for instance, the difference between this car, the Opera Performance S2000, and then compare that to the Amuse S2000. Then compare that to the AEM S2000. They're based on the same vehicle, but at the same time, completely different. This car is much more of a competition spec machine than most of the other S2000s, and as a competition car, as a track car specifically, it's very good. Now the car is certainly underappreciated, as I mentioned, but at the same time, it really does make an excellent competition vehicle. Now the engine, unsurprisingly, is a 2-litre. It's naturally aspirated in the case of this car, no turbos, no superchargers to benefit it, and that is kind of unfortunate, but it does make up for that with low weight and making the most of the power that it does have. Now fully upgraded, this car puts out 414 horsepower, so it is actually one of the least powerful S2000 tuner cars, but still has enough power considering that it only weighs 920 kilos, which is a lot lighter than many of the other S2000s. As far as torque, it's a VTEC, so typically they don't put out a huge amount, especially naturally aspirated ones, and peak torque is 250 foot-pounds, which isn't bad, and that torque also arrives at a pretty high RPM, 8700 RPM in fact, with peak power also at 8700, so unsurprisingly, being an S2000, it's an engine that likes to be worked hard. You get the most out of it when you're really screaming. Now, as far as horsepower per tonne, you're looking at 450, which isn't bad at all given the relatively limited amount of power that it has to work with, and the PP fully tuned, I would say, is actually not bad. The S2000, especially in a form as lightweight as this one, would be very easy to have a PP that's maybe a little bit too high. In the case of this car, it's actually not bad. 538 PP is the fully tuned spec, and I think that's personally quite reasonable for this car. Now, based on the price of 125 grand, the real question is, what does the car deliver? What kind of person should buy the car, and if so, what kind of purposes is it good for? Well, as far as who should buy it, I would recommend this car for two primary classes of people. One would be S2000 fans, because if you are a fan of the S2000, you will not be disappointed with this car. It's one of the best S2000 versions in the game, definitely within the realm of handling specifically. The second group is for people who need a track car, basically, but one for people who don't necessarily need a stupid amount of power. Just something that gets around corners quickly, maybe for technical tight circuits like city tracks or Ascari, Laguna Seca, that kind of thing, where, and I've mentioned this before with other vehicles, it's more about having a higher average speed through all of the corners rather than just being good on the straights. There are plenty of cars which are good on the straights, but if you can't get through the corners as quickly, it can let you down. And that's really one of the other great things about this car. Although it doesn't have an insane amount of power by any means, the handling is so good and the weight is so low that you can shift the car's weight and mass through corners really, really well. So for handling, it's a brilliant car. For straight line performance, fairly obviously not so much. As far as its overall package, it's a good car, I would say. It's not really a disappointing car at all, actually. Some cars that don't have perhaps as much power as you might hope, can sometimes be disappointing. With other cars though, you kind of don't expect them to have a huge amount of power. They just work well with what they've got. Cars like the Suzuki GSX-R4, the Mini Marcos, they do a lot with the power that they have to work with. This, I would say, is one of those cars. It's not necessarily as quick as something like a GSX-R4, but it is a useful car. And due to the fact that so few people use it, when you do pull this car out in a lobby, the vast majority of times people will probably underestimate you, so you'll have a good chance of winning on the right track. It's an excellent handling car with a huge amount of grip, very low weight, and an engine which isn't held back by the lag of a turbo or the load of a supercharger. It's just free-flowing, naturally aspirated power. So, if you need a track car, or if you're an S2000 fan, I'd definitely check out this car. And that's it overall for this particular episode. So I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.